Welcome to GizmoSapiens show 272, Apple of My Eye. So today we're going to be talking about the education world. Just some interesting news that had come out. Um, uh, you know, we're there's kind of this thing, this education reset going on. You know, resetting tech, resetting grades, resetting the importance of degrees. Um, we there's four stories that have stood out to me that have um, schools are cutting back on tech, which I think is hilarious because on the flip side, I'm seeing other schools buy more tech. Um, Harvard's uh, cap on A grades,
I heard about that this morning on the radio, so I'm glad you brought this one up because I have opinions.
master's degrees not being worth what they're the money to take them. It used to be a master's degree was a differentiator in getting a job, and now unless you have a PhD, there's no difference between a master's degree and then somebody who is really smart and has a bachelor's degree. And then Kansas City School District has made a big shift in their technology, um, which is it'll probably be the last thing we'll talk about. But the question is, uh, over the last 20 years, we have seen tech become more pervasive in the classroom, and I don't think there's anything wrong with tech being part of the curriculum. Um, and I have some opinions on what I think is the problem. Um, but as more tech has happened in the classroom, uh, we're seeing a backlash against that now, and I think that backlash is not so much from tech being in the classroom, but the backlash is just from the pervasiveness of tech everywhere, and I actually think it's an AI backlash. Um,
You're probably not wrong about that last point.
you know, and then again, I don't think it's so much a backlash against what's going on, but we're seeing we've talked about this in the past before, but we're seeing a backlash against the pervasiveness of degrees. And we really haven't talked about it in this perspective, but I've seen it in the workplace. I work in an industry where I know senior VPs at NVIDIA who don't have college degrees.
That tracks.
You know,
Well, tech has always been kind of on the edge of experimentation. A degree in experimentation is not a thing,
correct.
So like
Well,
there's no way to credential having the
well,
vision to
you
see
know,
what's
uh,
over the horizon.
although my family is heavily into the science and technology career path and degree fields and everything, um, we're all of us have also been educators, and you started out as an educator as well. And one of the things that I always talked about, and we've talked about not probably recently, but we've talked about in shows in the past, like I would say a couple years ago. But we talk about I've always said that, college is not for everybody. And college is not for everybody at the time that they graduate high school too.
Correct.
Sometimes people are ready for college, but they're not ready for college until they worked 3 or 4 years doing another job. Or um the other thing is when we talk about college, we're not talking about people today, at least in the United States, are not talking about uh, skilled trades and things like that. And that's a different thing. When you're working at a trade school and you're a journeyman or you're an apprentice, you're you're learning the skills specific to your job. You're not going through all the BS of, and I still think it's BS, even though I have a degree. But the whole idea of this liberal arts education, yeah, you spend the first 2 years of your degree field learning the general education requirements, which is the liberal part of the education, and then you spend 2 years in the specifics of your degree field. And I don't find that. Do I think everybody needs to write and everybody needs to know mathematics? Yes. Do I think that every degree field requires uh, communications and a class in communications, which ends up being a marketing class, or a class in a foreign language or whatever? No, I don't think those should be requirements. As to get a degree, particularly if you're doing something very technical, you know, it, it just doesn't make sense. It's almost like it's a distraction, a waste of time. And colleges and universities have used that to weed students out. That's what it's our weeding or our filtering process till we get to the students who are. But that's not what college has become.
Well, it's not what it's supposed to be for.
Well,
Put it that way.
what they've done is they've added all these classes, but they've removed all the academic rigor. So there's the filter doesn't work anymore. They're graduating more people, and they're also graduating more people in degree fields than we have jobs for in those degree fields. Now, don't get me wrong. Um, the company I work for, everybody in the company is uh, is an artist or a musician. There are also people who have degrees in highly technical fields, and being they don't have degrees in music, which I unfortunately do, but I do have a minor in computer science. Um, but I argue that a lot of what I learned in music, particularly when you look at how many jobs there are available in music and how many musicians who are out there who don't have degrees in music that you're competing with.
Right.
And we can talk about talent. I know great talent because that's what my I was learning to become, um, was somebody who recognized great talent. And uh, and there's talent everywhere. But the actual jobs that require a music degree in music is probably 5% of the music majors that are graduating.
I'll take the under.
Yeah, it might be less than that. Today, it might be, And so, I my argument is that for most students, well, one, all of these schools that are offering music programs um should not have music programs. Or at least have 4-year degrees in music programs. You have an associate's degree in music. You can have an associate's degree or you can offer a program where you're a minor in music. Because I remember going out for gigs, particularly for professional, like everybody is credentialed and lettered, and I'm competing against people in symphonies and stuff where they were they they either didn't have a music degree, but they were a phenomenal musician. That's why I said talent is everywhere. Or they were music minors, you know, and in some cases, these people had a lot more experience than I did. Coming out of college as a 4-year music student, and so these fine arts degrees are great, but I don't need every college in the state of Ohio or every college in the state of Kentucky to have a music program. You know why they have them? Because they graduated a whole bunch of people who then went on and got master's degrees in music, and because that's the thing, most of your instructors at colleges today do not have PhDs. They have master's degrees. and they're on the faculty, and particularly in like the fine arts departments and stuff. Um, and so that's where we've created a system that is creating these. It's a self-fulfilling system, because I mean, some extremely talented individuals that I know, went to school with, graduated. I've watched them go get their master's degree and study over here and teach for a while, and now they got their PhD and they've gone over to this other school. It's it but it's not like they're famous or they're gigging every night, as part of their educational their faculty status, they might play a concert or two at the university, but they're not playing with like the local symphony as, a regular player. They're not playing in the music studios as musicians. Um, so I look at that and I go, why do we have so many fine arts programs for that? It's same thing with art. The best artists I've ever known were not the ones who went and studied and learned art history. I mean, is it interesting? Absolutely. I loved music history. Yeah, I loved early music history, and then the classical period I disliked, and then I really liked the stuff after. The romantic period was great. But that being said, you know, I'm picking on that because I know that career field and that degree program extremely
Right.
well. And we talk about tech, and a very good friend of mine is a senior VP at Nvidia. He doesn't have a college degree. He's brilliant. I mean, I remember sitting at a customer site, um, and we're going through lines of code, and I mean, he's scrolling through this lines of code at like 2,000 lines per second. I mean, it's just streaming by, and he goes, "Hold it." He stops the mouse, goes, "Right here's where the problem is," and he was right. And he did that multiple occasions. I mean, and so to me, a lot of it is where what we've done is we've created this self-fulfilling prophecy, and part of it is we've told this story to ourselves. After World War II, the great American dream changed a little bit, and that part of that dream was that, because all these GIs came home and they had the GI Bill, and so they were using the GI Bill to go to college, and so through the you know through the 50s and 60s, you had this great influx of people whose families had never been educated at the college level now get educated at the college level. And they then translated that back to, you know, if you're really fulfilling the American dream, then you're going to go to college. And the thing is, it goes back to what I said before. I've watched kids who were never college material and might not ever be trade school material. And I've watched kids who were college material, but not until they had spent 4 or 5 years in the real world. And I'm not talking about the privileged kids who go, well, I'm going to take a gap year. I'm talking about kids who, they needed some experience in the real world to realize what they really wanted to do. Because how many kids have you watched go to college and not, uh, change their major, or they get out and they have a degree and they don't like what they got their degree in, you know?
Well,
And I will say this. My mom was right about something. She told me this years ago. She goes, regardless of what you get your degree in, your college degree is like a driver's license to work. And it is to a large degree. But the value of that driver's license has dropped. I mean, it's a curve, and every year that curve drops closer to, the value of that degree drops. It's, like today, my degree has nothing to do with the institutional knowledge and the skills that I've developed over the last 30 years of actual work.
right. Well, but what I think the college experience does for the workforce is lay some foundations for how you interact with each other and interact with potential like hierarchies of bosses.
True, but
But those are skills you could just as easily learn in
in
the
the
actual workforce.
workforce, exactly. And I've known, and the argument against that is I've known several people who I think were had dysfunctional personalities where they had tremendous credentials and they even had tremendous skill, but they, regardless of being successful in college, they were only successful at a job for 12 months at a time because they would have some personality conflict at
Yeah.
work and they either get fired or they quit.
Well, that's somebody who should never have actually graduated
Yeah.
because they didn't learn what they were supposed to learn in
Yeah.
college.
But, on the flip side of that, um,
That's the failure of the liberal arts part. The general education stuff is supposed to teach you those skills.
correct.
And when you don't learn those skills, you should not
But
pass.
that's because part of the general education part of it doesn't make sense anymore.
Well,
What
I
you're
would say it
learning
never did.
is not useful. Uh, um, you know, and I'll tell you, uh, the one thing that I did get out of music class or all the courses in music that I took were the soft skills, which is really what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Working as a team, accomplishing a goal, um, that kind of thing.
And that's not to say that like everybody that goes to college has to come out an extrovert that is a world class team player,
Hmm.
because there are a lot of very successful lone wolves who,
But I think a lot of this goes down to academic rigor, and the thing that's happened with academic rigor, it's everything's connected. So we have this "Thou shalt go to college." There that was a mantra for families for years. Um, you know, it was if you were poor and a minority and you wanted to get out of the situation you were in, go to college, get a college degree, figure out how to do it. And on top of that, so what had happened over time as we had more and more people get college degrees is it lowered the value of having a college degree for one thing.
well, and not only that, but I think it beat out of the American populace a real sense of true entrepreneurship and
Hmm.
rugged individualism.
It
Two
did.
things that are essential to the American dream.
And so in that same vein, that's what happened with so what happened is now you've equalized the playing field because so many people have college degrees. So employers are not no longer using a college degree as a bachelor's degree as a mark of differentiation, based on your experience. You should have learned these soft skills, all of this other stuff. So then it's this goes back to master's degrees no longer assure security or premium wages. And so Burning Glass Institute did an analysis of Bureau of Labor Statistics data showing unemployment of under 35 workers with master's degrees is now its highest level in roughly 20 years. Why is that? Um, Many young professionals used to view graduate school as a fallback in a tough job market, but rising tuition and soft demand in some white collar sectors make the return on investment much more uncertain. Why is that? That is because in order to differentiate yourself now, bachelor degree wasn't it. I now had to get a master's degree, you know, and and so we push that up. Now, the funny thing is that in that trend, PhDs now fit that the employment rate on the Bureau of Labor Statistics for PhDs has been greater because that's now the differentiation point. But what is that doing to our workforce? It's doing a couple things. One, it's now kids who are in academic situations. It's much easier if you're getting your bachelor's degree to go get your master's degree and go from your master's degree directly into a PhD program because
Well, the issue with that
but
is
they're not getting the experience in the
exactly.
job market, and so when they come in, they don't have the soft skills or the management skills that are required. Even if you don't manage people, like directly manage employees underneath you, you manage people. You manage your boss, you manage your coworkers, you manage yourself.
You manage your customers,
Hmm.
your clients,
Correct.
your partnerships.
And the thing is too, is jobs that used to ask for a bachelor's are now listing a master's degree, and the pay
Didn't get a bump.
didn't get a bump.
The return on the investment on an education is diminishing.
Yes,
It won't be too much longer, and the same thing is going to happen with the doctorate that's now happening with the master's.
correct. Absolutely. It's a
Those jobs
cycle.
that require a degree are going to continue to advance the degree that's going to be required, and the pay is not going to be commensurate with that level of education.
Well, and the thing is we're also seeing because of that lack of differentiation, particularly between a bachelor's and a master's degree, is that employers are now shifting their and this started with the tech sector. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, it started with the tech sector. But they're shifting their hiring based on skills-based hiring and experience over actual graduate and bachelor credentials.
But that's because the bachelor's degree has become a high school diploma,
Diploma, exactly.
and the high school diploma has become. I, I question whether or not high school diploma is even worth what like middle school graduation
Yeah.
would have been worth. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, how many people now graduate with an honors diploma? When I graduated high school and got an honors diploma, that was actually a big deal. It meant that you had a certain GPA that you maintained your entire time.
well, this is a good transition into the Harvard thing.
Yes, and so that was what I wanted to talk about next because this all works together. Um, so Harvard and Harvard is going to be the beginning of they're the tip of the spear in this transition.
I'm not so sure about that, but let's get into what we're talking about before we agree to disagree on this point.
Well, so the thing is now this is what I don't understand about the uh the Harvard thing, but I go back and I talk about academic rigor. It used to be when you went to college, it was academically hard. And there are still degree programs at colleges that are academically hard. Um, but they're going to cap the amount of A grades that they're going to give anymore. They're basically going to a uh, typical bell curve. And the reason is because so many Harvard graduates, which to get into Harvard is supposed to be so hard, we're 4.0, I mean, like 85, 90% of their graduates were 4.0 students, their grade point average. And so now they're going to, the faculty, 70% of the faculty, it was 458 to 201, approved a policy limiting A's in undergraduate letter graded courses to 20% of enrollment. 20% is exactly the bell curve, plus 4 extra A's per course.
So 20% plus 4.
Yeah. Now, they're saying that A minuses are not capped. The policy takes effect in fall of 2027. And they're going to review it after 3 years, which actually is fair. They're actually putting a sunset clause in there. Um, but they say that grade inflation at Harvard has reached critical levels, and that's what proponents have said. Now, my argument is has Harvard suffered what a lot of other institutions, state institutions, and things, and that academic rigor there has fallen.
Well, that therein lies my beef with this.
Yeah. Well, I don't like the bell curve because the idea of the bell curve is that regardless of if in a perfect scenario, if everybody got an a 4 point in a class, you had 10 people in a class that got a 4 point, then you're still going to have 20% of those 10 people, two people fail.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
again,
actually, you're
now it's becoming a this is a problem that we see in business all
well,
over the
what
place. You start getting
now it
uh
becomes a political game.
it does, but not only that, but it becomes about measuring numbers that don't reflect the quality of the merit of the knowledge imparted.
Yeah,
If you master the skills, you get the A. That's what education is supposed to be about. The
exactly.
learning, not the
Well,
numbers.
and this goes back to a lot of the other things that we talk about. We talk about you just made the comment that is a high school diploma really worth what it is? Because academic rigor in public schools has fallen off the charts. I mean,
It's
you have
practically non-existent.
you have kids. My youngest daughter is a good example. You have a kid who is way too smart for the school. There were so many kids in the and the, we this was an argument. There are so many academic overachievers in our school district, which is true. I mean, you talk about you know they graduate almost 100% of their students, and they almost 100. It's somewhere in the 90 percentile of them go to college and graduate. With degrees. Which is what you want. It sounds great, but my daughter was ended up being number one in her class, and other kids were saying it wasn't fair because she used the dual enrollment system to her advantage. She graduated high school with a high school diploma, a honors diploma, and a uh,
An
an
associate's
associate's
degree.
degree from Miami University, and she was number one in the class because she had such a high grade point average at college level work. And she on her senior year she took two AP classes at the high school and got college credit for both of those. Took the tests and got college credit. Um, she legitimately was an highly academic achiever. Um, but the school district, because they think that because there were some students who were getting it appeared that when they were using the dual enrollment system, it had made it artificially look like they were doing better because they were taking gen ed classes and getting credit for them and getting A's in those classes, but the AP classes were harder theoretically. All that meant the AP classes had more hard work. They were not harder because the one thing that's different about college and high school and what a lot of kids don't understand, I I don't. I was not one. And my youngest daughter the same way. I was not a kid who needed somebody to stand over me and go, "Hey, this is due Tuesday, and this is due Thursday, and this is due next Monday." I just needed somebody to tell me when everything was due at the beginning of the semester, and then I did it, and I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's what AP classes are. You need to do all this homework, and it's due tomorrow, and then this project is due Thursday, and this other project is due Monday over the weekend. And they assign a lot more homework than is really necessary to learn the skills needed to be successful in that. That's what AP classes have done.
But
um,
that's
but
because
that's because you're having school districts, the teachers justifying what they're teaching.
and they've industrialized the educational process.
Correct. Well, the other thing is, and this is where I'm all for the U.S. Federal Department of Education to go away. Um, because and I totally get it. I mean, it's how do you quantify the money, the tax money you're giving to each state, um, to justify the amount of money they're asking for? And the which I think is stupid because the states give the money to the federal government and then they give it back to the state. But that that's another argument in and of itself. Um, but the so they did this whole standardized test. And I remember, this started back in the 70s because I remember taking the California Achievement Test
Mhm.
and then it became like by the time I was in high school, Ohio hadn't when I graduated high school, Ohio hadn't made it mandatory, but you had to pass these state tests. And I had taken 2 years of high school in Michigan, and they required it, and I had already passed all those tests. So I never had to take the ones in Ohio, but my kids certainly did. And they spend 2 years in high school teaching those tests
Yeah.
because the school districts get rated and on
There's
how their kids perform in these standardized state tests to graduate.
which is why you get those little admission scandals where
Yeah.
there are districts that don't want the dumb kids, and so they ship them off somewhere else, and the smart kids don't go to their neighborhood school. They have to be trucked over the other side of the county, so they go to the smart kid school, and none of that makes any sense in the real world. None of it does.
Yeah. And the funny thing is so the proponents are saying that this will solve the great inflation issue, where everybody was getting an A. But
I
my question
disagree.
is if everybody's getting an A, is that because of great inflation or is that because of academic rigor
Either they've mastered the material or
or
they
they haven't?
haven't. That is
Yes.
the
And
only
then, the
reason to have a grading system in the
correct.
first place.
And then, the people who are critics of this is that fixed caps and percentile based honors are going to hurt Harvard students competing with schools that do not. And that's
Correct.
actually right.
That's absolutely true.
You're going to make, you're going to have more Yale graduates who now, who are, you know, 4-point students than you're going to have Harvard graduates. So what is that going to do to Harvard? Again, the way to fix that is change the standard of academic rigor. If you want your Harvard degree, an A at Harvard, to really mean something, that means that the level of skill that you're teaching has to be greater. That
Yes,
to get an A, and there's nothing wrong with an entire class of students getting C's or B's in a class at college level, in my opinion.
correct. Because again, it's about mastery
Mastering
of
skill.
skills,
Yep.
not is this degree. See, I think it's become a thing where like these schools are becoming degree factories because
Well, they're becoming
it's
degree.
how they get more money.
Exactly. Exactly. They
It's
they don't
it's
want to.
it's not about the skills anymore. It's about the money.
Yeah. Because to a large degree, graduates from Harvard and Yale, from a competitive, can they do the job, are not any different than if you went to USC or you went to Ohio State or you went to University of Kentucky, you went to University of Alabama. At the end of the day, if you're getting an engineering degree from University of Alabama and you got an engineering degree from MIT, there should be, based upon the how do I want to say this? Based upon the prestige of MIT, there should be a skills gap.
There should be.
There isn't though.
And that's the problem.
That's the problem.
It stopped
As a as a
becoming
ma-
it
as a
stopped
matter of fact, like my youngest daughter got her degree from University of Alabama Huntsville, which is an engineering school. It's part of the University of Alabama
right.
system, and that's where all the engineering people, aerospace, industrial, civil, electrical, mechanical, computer science engineers, that's where they all go. she gets job offers all the time just based on her credentials because they know that the quality of graduates coming out of there are phenomenal.
Yes.
And I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm glad you took your full ride there and we didn't pay to send you somewhere, supposedly prestigiously more prestigious than that. And I think that's the other big issue that you're finding at like Harvard's and Yale's and some of this is that they don't their faculty's not capable of of
Also correct.
creating better academic rigor. So they're going
As
to do this artificial thing where because again,
the
you
degrading quality of education has floated up further and further
again,
up
it's a
the chain.
system that's feeds itself.
It does.
Why, going back to why do all these schools, University of Alabama Huntsville should not have a music department?
Shouldn't, but they will because
No,
they're
it's not that they will. They do.
yeah.
Why? Because there's so many music school graduates, and so somebody's figured out that hey, if our school has a music program, then we can
Churn out
become
that many more
more degrees.
degrees and rake up that much more cash.
Yes.
It's
Not well, and then it's self fulfilling because oh, who's my pool of candidates to be faculty? I'm
which brings me to something that I don't think is on your list. Vivek Ramaswamy has made a
Big V.
part of what he wants to run for governor here. One of the things he wants to accomplish once he's elected, if we're so lucky, um, is he wants to reduce the number of college programs, university programs in the state system. So our friends at Central State are complaining that what Vivek wants to do is shut down Central State, which is, as a historically black university, now you're running into the political nonsense of that.
Yeah.
Um, but none of that changes the fact that we have too many schools pumping out too many degrees in areas that they have no business being in.
Yeah. Well,
I,
it's just like look how many education majors exist across the country. I mean, there are colleges that their entire job is to create education, teachers.
yeah.
They're called teachers colleges. Um, do we need all of them? And that over time, again, it goes back to the story. GIs came home from World War II, had the GI Bill, they got a better education thing, they get a better degree, or better, because also
To answer your question, yes.
World War
And
II,
I'm going to tell you why.
well, World War II, you had a lot of people who would never have interacted with college graduates now interacting with lots of college graduates because all the officers that they worked for were college graduates because that was a requirement to be an officer in the military. For most officers, I mean, there
Yeah.
were exceptions, but so they came home and they were like, well, how do I, become more like them, be
Yeah.
and so that's what happened. And so what happens when you have okay, so colleges start getting full. So what happens? Let's start a new college.
Yeah.
And so you're going from 1940 to 2026, and the proliferation of schools is incredible.
The other part of that is the academic rigor of the teachers themselves.
Yes.
You know,
Well, like I said, academic rigor has been falling.
as the degradation of the meritocracy of the degrees, be it a high school diploma to a bachelor's degree to a master's degree to a PhD, has disintegrated. The quality of the teachers have equally
Disintegrated.
disintegrated.
Yeah.
So, to answer the question you asked, do we need to be teaching a whole bunch of teachers? Yes, so that we finally get some teachers that might actually have to actually fight for a job rather than by increasing the supply of teachers, the demand for quality ones should also increase.
Yeah, but that's not how it works.
Wow.
because
Because what they do is then they'll
well, you
just build
have
another palace.
you have a teachers union.
Yeah, well, and then there's that. Right.
I mean, the, there's so many things that feed into that defeat that. I mean, in a capitalist system, that's exactly what should work. There's this many jobs. We're putting this many teachers out there. The cream of the crop, the people who are the smartest, who are the best teachers, should rise to the top. But that's not what happens. What
Well,
happens is, hey, my my mother or my aunt or my uncle or my dad, they work in the school district, and I just graduated from teachers college, and I need a job. What happens? A little nepotism goes on. I mean, again.
there's nothing specifically about the field of education that is any less than any other
Hmm.
field. Nepotism happens everywhere. But the problem with education being a field where nepotism in particular is a bad thing
Well, but that's
is the end result
yes.
is
Well,
degraded.
the thing is nepotism doesn't mean that the person you're getting is a bad teacher necessarily.
Yeah,
But what happens is bad teachers, there's no way to get rid of them.
correct.
And that's so nepotism brings a bad teacher in, the union protects that
But
teacher
and
forever.
again, there's nothing particularly outstanding about the education field. Unions have been doing that to every field that they're in.
Yeah.
I mean, try and get rid of a bad cop for crying out loud. You can't do
Oh,
it.
I
It's
know.
impossible.
I know. So let's go back. We kind of beat that to death.
Yeah, we did. Well, we both had opinions on
Yeah, we
that
did.
little segment, so like I get it.
So, but also, so this ties into this. So, you know, i- for the last 30 years, technology, and in reality, last 40 years, when I was in high school, uh, it wasn't PCs because laptops were not, I
We're
mean,
not really a thing, yeah.
well, they existed, but portable computers were so expensive that, you were never going to get one for every student in a classroom or anything. But the big technology leap is we went from, um, I remember going into from my sophomore to junior year, Ohio made a requirement that in the upper level math classes, so your pre-calc and trig and your calculus classes, that they were going to use the new 3D calculators. And they were not cheap. You had to go out and if you were in those classes, you were footing the bill for like a $400 calculator. This is back in the late 80s. Um, but that being said, a personal PC back then was 1,200 bucks. Well, 1,200 bucks would equate to $4,000 or $5,000 today.
Yeah.
You know, um, so I remember having to find because you had to have there was only two companies who made them, and we had to use the Texas Instrument one, and they only had one model,
Right.
and in the classroom because remember the days of overhead. All you young kids listening to our show now, they had these things called overhead projectors that had a clear piece of plastic film that was projected on the screen and the teacher could write on it. Well, they created an LCD projection system that would sit on top of the overhead projector and the teacher could plug their calculator into it and then we could
Yeah.
go through all the trig and calculus program problems, on this. Um, so, the changing technology, it's not like educational technology. The article that I read, they were talking about since the pandemic there was a boom, and I'm like, no, let's go way back before that, you know, because that was a requirement. Everybody in those math classes had to have one of these graphing calculators.
The problem with the pandemic wasn't the
No,
technology, it was the fact that kids weren't coming to class.
correct. You were at home, and that was a distraction.
Yeah.
And the problem is even though they were at home, the devices that they were using weren't limited to the school network, so you couldn't block them from going to YouTube or doing this or doing that, which you could do at if
Yeah.
you're at a school network. Um, but it's in 20 by 22 2022 23 2023, 88% of public school systems had at least one device per student in the United States. And so what's funny is, again, this is misplaced um, parenting, in my opinion.
Uh-huh.
But parents and some educators are now complaining about the TikTok style like, attention spans and kids staring at screens all day, prompting call to return to pencil and paper in many school districts. And again, I don't think that's a technology issue. And um,
I wouldn't have a problem with the technology being part of the discussion if the reality of the end result of the conversation is we have to teach kids how to think. We've allowed our technology to replace thinking,
well,
and
it's
AI is going to make that even
worse.
worse.
Well, not only that, but the other issue, um, and my point is saying this is one, you're using technology in the right way. So if the kids are at school, you're going to limit, just like a corporation would limit employees going to go places at a school, treat it like a business. If I need my kids to, they can only go to these websites for this stuff. Or when they're in this classroom, they don't use their personal devices for learning that they take home and even if we issued it as part of the school fees. Because I mean, my son, when he was in school, he got issued a Chromebook. It was kind of funny. Uh, because I don't even know what happened to it. He never used it because he was in a creative arts program, and they had to use Photoshop and stuff. So he used his MacBook,
Right.
and but they issued him a Chromebook, and when he was at school, the Chromebook was limited to accessing the Google. They could access Google and Google Docs and all of that, but it was the implementation for the school district. You know,
Right. Yeah, I
and
totally get it.
that's how the kids would do their homework. Like they write papers and they would submit them through Google Docs and um but so one of the things that's going on is now school districts are saying, well, wait a minute, we invested heavily in computers during COVID, and now you're telling me that you're going to go back to pencil and paper, which I don't have a problem with. But if you're going back to pencil and paper, you need to teach kids how to write in cursive. um
Uh,
and but now this technology is sitting unused or restricted, and the whole idea is that all the screen time is mental health and distraction, and we're not getting the learning outcomes that we want. But I don't think that is about tech. It's about academic rigor. Again, I'm going to go back to my academic rigor. If I'm teaching a standardized test and I'm teaching is this is how you answer these questions on a standardized test. I'm not teaching you why is this important? Why is it critical thinking? Critical thinking is part of academic rigor.
it really is.
And the idea is that when a kid it used to be the idea is when a kid left high school and they went to college, the big difference between high school, like I said before, and college is in high school you have somebody who's your surrogate mother babying you all the way, telling you to get this done and when this is due and all this other stuff. When you get to college, college does not baby you. This is the syllabus. These things are due in these times. You come to class, I don't care. But these things are due at this time because this is what you're getting grade on. I'm not grading you on being here every day. So
Now,
if
some of those college professors did grade you on whether or not you were there every day, but again, that
yeah.
goes back to the fact that, uh, those professors tended to fall into one of two categories: either ones who were too full of themselves and were like, "If you're not here, you're not learning," or the ones that were trying to mother all their
Well, and
students.
so you have this one juxtaposition or this position going on, and then you have a juxtaposition. So Kansas City Schools, which is a huge school district, just signed a deal with Apple to replace every computing device that is in faculty and students' hands, which is over 30,000 devices with MacBook Neos. So on one hand, we have these 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 groups saying no, 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 and on the other hand, we have other groups, and part of this too is, uh, I would argue, is is the helicopter parents versus the non-helicopter. You're
Free
talking.
range.
Well, yeah, the free range type situation, but I'm thinking more of like when you look at the coasts, you look at the two arguments. One of them, they're arguing about feelings and and screen time and all of this, which is a helicopter parent type situation. Because at the end of the day, when the kids leave high school and they go to college, you're on your laptop every day. When you go to work, most jobs,
Every
you're
day.
on a computer every day. So if you don't start in high school, because this goes back to one of the things that I've always talked about. So, like when you go to college, one of the things the best high schools in the nation do, uh, they do one of two things. They do like Springboro, the school district that where my kids went to school, does, and that is they allow students to and actively encourage them to do the dual enrollment thing, so they get an idea in high school what college is like. uh, meaning you go to a general education class, a history class. Everybody had to take 2 semesters or 3 semesters of history in college as a general education thing. And don't get me wrong, there's some value to those classes, but I don't think they're necessary. I don't think to be successful in a job that you necessarily need to know those, because again, it's history. We're rehashing something.
Well,
But you're in a class. I remember going to History 101 and History 102, and you're in a class. I was in a class with 600 other students in this giant lecture hall. And the reason that that's important, and why a class like that where it's largely lecture and then you're just regurgitating facts back as information, um in history class, they're not asking your opinion on whether this was right or wrong.
oh,
they're
they
a-
are now.
they are now, but they shouldn't be. They should be asking you in 1776 who did what.
Yeah.
Or what were the pivotal events in 1776 in the United States. That's the kind of question you would ask from a history class. um but that's a regurgitation type situation. you know um that is not a critical thinking, in my opinion, type class. Why are we putting students at the high school level, particularly as juniors and seniors, the closer they're getting to college, in classes where it's a largely lecture based system, and we're limiting the class size to 20 to 30 students. Now, if that's all you have enrolled in that, like you're a really small school district, fine. But bigger school districts where you have thousands of students in high school, make that 100, make those classes big.
Part of the problem with that, I think, is the architecture of the palaces that they've been building. They've decided that 30 is the maximum a single teacher in high school can deal with. Eh,
Well, I also think it's a function of back to the labor union. If it's 20 to 30 students per teacher per period,
you need more
you need
teachers,
more teachers, which means more union dues, which means more money.
right? Which is we've rehashed all that. Um, I I want to know what happened to
But going back to like,
the people who were saying technology was going to replace the teacher.
yeah.
Where are those people at? What happened to those guys? Because I can't wait to see Copilot teach these kids, and these kids flip them off and call them names and all that jazz, and then see what happens.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
Skynet will just kill them.
yeah.
I mean, that's
But on the flip side, in the past, when I talk about in the past, we go back to the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and the 30s. And if you were not somebody cut out for school, you were disruptive, you were expelled, you know, or you were encouraged to leave on your own.
Well, see now they
And they
can't
don't do they,
they
they want to.
can't do that anymore
Yeah,
because then you are going to create a school that can't pass the
standardized
standardized
tests.
testing,
Yeah,
and so then they don't get funding, and then they have to shut those schools down. They haven't dealt with the behavioral problems,
correct.
and that's been a
But
long-standing problem.
but that behavioral problem is because, well, one, it 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 the behavioral problem. Well, the reality of it is academic rigor, the behavior problems, all of that stems from this quantification of funding or qualification for funding by quantifying the students based on standardized tests.
Well, and they're measuring the wrong stuff,
Correct.
which is a problem that every business will eventually run into.
Yes.
You constantly have to be evaluating what it is you're evaluating and whether or not what you're measuring is actually the right stuff to be measuring.
Yeah.
The role that I play in the business that I'm in is asking that question a lot. Are we measuring the right stuff?
Yeah. Well, I remember when you first started that job, it was takes.
Yeah.
People pick up phone calls because
And
people
it,
responding to emails, people, responding to.
well, and even before takes became a thing, attempts was the thing. You know,
Yeah.
how many calls were being made or how many doors were being knocked. That doesn't matter. It's how many conversations were you having?
Yeah.
That's then became the thing. And then it became, well, how many takes does it take to get an actual vote? Now, how are we, we're pushing the qualitative analysis deeper and deeper into the results end of the equation. It becomes about the outputs, not the inputs.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up. Let's have a little lightning round of questions.
Lay it
We'll
on me.
both answer. So, um, one change you would make to grading or transcripts to better reflect learning.
Reinstatement of meritocracy as the defining factor of whether or not you not only just pass, but like what grade you get.
I totally agree. Again, that goes back to academic rigor. If a class requires critical thinking, not just repeat of rote information, that's what you're being graded on. And not to say that you can't do that in a history type class. It is possible to say, well, what are the common things between the Romans and the United States that we see, um, in the development of both nations and today?
Yes,
That's critical thinking.
it really
You
is.
know,
And I assure you that question is not being asked. What's being asked is something to do with the patriarchy of the Romans and how Donald Trump is evil incarnate.
yeah.
I don't know how those things go
How do you
together.
feel about the color orange?
Purple because aliens don't wear hats.
Yeah.
I, oh,
Um,
what else you got?
so, how would you change? You would personally make K through tech. How would you change personally if you could make that change on a personal level? The use of tech in K through 12 schools.
Um, I would make sure that the usage of the tech didn't interfere with the development of critical thinking skills.
I agree with you. I think that
You can use tech to develop critical thinking
correct.
skills. It's what we've done is we've said, oh, this here's a calculator. Now you no longer need to know why 2 plus 2 equals
Equals 4.
4. You just need to know how to push these buttons and hit equal
Yeah,
sign.
and there are that's a good example. They don't require kids to learn all their times tables anymore.
Correct.
And there and while I disagree with I let me restate this. Tech needs to be aligned with the learning of skills that are required in the world.
Yes.
And I've watched too many kids come out of high school and frankly college who have problems counting money, who have problems they don't know their times tables. They don't know that 12 times 12 is 144. And some of them are easy. You should know, but all of that, I shouldn't have to go to my computer or my calculator to figure those types of things out.
They don't know that a quarter past 12 is 12:15.
15. That's a good example. And that's just normal everyday stuff. But that type of stuff
Uh,
all plays into
I would even accept 12.25 because a quarter is 25
25 cents.
cents.
Yeah.
That at least shows me some critical thinking. But I don't know is not an answer.
Yeah. But that tech use has to align with getting the outcomes that are required
Yeah.
for critical thinking, for academic rigor. Um, not that I believe that, when we were in high school, particularly in math classes, they're like, well, when you're at work, you won't
You'll
have the
never use
opportunity
that.
to be able
Yeah.
to look this up. And I'm like, every engineer I know who works at General Motors and other places have a line of books at their desk. And when they need to look up something hard because they don't use it every day, they grab the book and they look it up,
Yep.
you know?
And what's the difference between a bookshelf full of reading material and pulling out your smartphone and consulting Dr. Google?
Correct.
I don't have a problem with that whatsoever.
Exactly. Well, and you'll get a kick out of this. So, give you an example. So, when we were in college, the internet was new,
Yeah,
but almost all the data that was out on the internet was at educational institutions.
correct.
And we're in music history class, and Dr. Donovan was our professor, and I'm writing a paper, and I did all the right citations and everything, but I used internet citations, and he cautioned me. He's like, we can't guarantee that this is valid information. And I said, but Dr. Donovan, this is from this, this music history. This is a paper that's published online at university. I forget what university it was, at this other university, by a famous professor.
Yeah,
And I said, how can that be not relevant? Because I'm citing another, you know,
legitimate
legitimate
source.
source. It wasn't like I went to, like you would go to today and I would go, hey, Google, find me everything you know about X, Y, and Z.
That's the problem with AI,
Yeah,
because then copy and paste the answer, and then what did you actually learn? You didn't even evaluate whether or not the AI was hallucinating or not.
correct. Correct. And the last thing is what is the one piece of advice for someone considering a master's program right now?
Don't.
That's what I would say too.
Eh, because all that's going to do is continue to degrade the value of a master's degree, and
Well, not only that,
your
but
value
your
will
value and
continue to go down.
the time that you take to get the master's degree, you're putting yourself in debt. You're taking yourself out of the
The
actual workforce,
the return on investment on that is just awful.
which means that you're not developing the experience and the institutional knowledge that will make you competitive in the workforce depending on your career
Your career
field.
path, yeah.
And having a master's degree and a lot of uh, if you're a research scientist, there's probably some value still getting a master's degree.
Sure.
If you were an engineer, there's
Mm.
probably no value in getting a master's degree.
No, the practical experience you'll get in the job market
Far
will
outweighs.
far outweigh what you get
Yeah.
at the university level.
Yep. So our call to action: um, teachers, students, parents, contact us. Send feedback to gizmosapiens at gmail.com. That's GizmoSapiens at gmail.com. Let us know your experiences. Have you seen your school district cut back or ramp up classroom devices? Uh, are you a college student or a college professor? And are they, is your college experimenting with grade caps or considering it, particularly in lieu of what's been passed at Harvard. Um, if you have a master's degree, did it actually move the needle in your career, particularly if you're younger?
Yeah.
You know, um, and we'll see you on the digital flip side.
You've been listening to Gizmo Sapiens, a technology and entertainment podcast. You can reach us at our email address at gizmosapiens@gmail.com. That's GizmoSapiens@gmail.com. We'd really love to hear from you, and we'll see you next week from the digital flip side.